Welcome, everybody, to the Fire Chat podcast. I'm your host, Rich Rice, and today on the show I have a very, very special guest, Mr. Peter Fortunato. Pete, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So, Pete, first of all, thank you for coming out here. This is our second year in a row we've been able to get you out here. So, I wanted to, get you on the podcast again. I know you were on it last year when you were out here. And I got a lot of good feedback. A lot of people said that they really enjoyed it. I guess Bill Cook called me and said that your grandson had watched it.
Oh yeah,
at one point.
My grandson, my nephews, and
yeah, that's cool. So, this is I call this podcast Fire Chat. It stands for Financial Independence Through Real Estate. I do like to get more of a. Yeah, I feel like there's lots of podcasts and lots of stuff out there of a lot of higher end, how to do deals and deal talk, and but I kind of like to get a little bit more on the personal side of just investing in real estate, because I think it is a people driven thing, and I like to see what people's backgrounds and where they came from and all that good stuff. So we're going to talk about deals, obviously, but we're going to in real estate. But for those of you that we had the prior episode of you was on here at some point. For those of you who haven't maybe watched that, give us a quick rundown of tell us the story on how you got into real estate.
I graduated from high school and went into real estate as an agent, intent on getting enough assets so that I didn't have to work.
Yep. What'd you tell your? You like to tell your story about your guidance counselor. Let's what's that one? So you told them probably something that they're, most people probably wouldn't tell their guidance counselor.
Well, they just asked the question, and I was just being honest, and they said, "What do you want to be after you get out of school?" And I said, "Unemployed."
Yeah, and I wish I had that's probably what I would want to tell my. It's a lot of people in high school, they don't know exactly what they're gonna do. You knew from the very beginning that you didn't want to go be you didn't want to go or be a worker bee, right?
Well, I was blessed in that I grew up with entrepreneurs as my parents, and the people around me were entrepreneurial. And so I knew I didn't want somebody else telling me what to do all the time. And I literally despised school and being told to sit still, raise my hand if I had an opinion. I didn't like it. And I got through school because I brought really good books with me, and I'd sit and read.
Yeah. I feel you. I know a lot of us probably, was there any particular subject, or did you have a teacher that you liked going along the way, more than others, or?
I had a few. I had a seventh grade teacher who I couldn't get over at the end of the year. She hadn't taught us anything. I'm looking and saying, I didn't learn anything new. And then I realized she taught me how to organize all the things I had that I did know. And the entire year was outlining, organizing. And it was a miracle what a big change that was. That was a very, very important year of school for me.
That's cool. I have, similarly, I loved my teachers in grade school, middle school, and then not so much high school. By the time I got to high school, it was I felt like we were in more of the, what do you call it? The education mill kind of thing. And it was just go to college. Was there any, it sounds like that's a no. Was there any ever inkling of you possibly going to university, or you were?
Well, I went to college, but mostly because my parents wanted me to. And I enjoyed college, but had I to live my life over again, I would have gone to college perhaps when I was 30. Or I'd have gone to college like Steve Jobs did, when you hear that discussion he had at Stanford, where he just went to college and took the classes he wanted by auditing them rather than wasting the money.
Really? Where'd you go to school?
Suffolk University in Boston.
Nice. I didn't know that. I don't think I've ever asked you that before. And it's funny you say the auditing thing. I didn't even know you could do that until I got to. There were so many classes I took that I probably the first 2 years of college, I felt like I retook high school. I wish I could have just audited out of, or just, tested out of some of them instead of but nobody told me.
Yeah.
Those guidance counselors never mentioned that at all. So, what was your favorite subject?
I don't know. Any place that there was a lot of discussion, a lot of argument, I enjoyed. I mean, it didn't so the social sciences more than anything else. Because I like the differences of opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Did you do the speech and debate and
Nope.
any of that? No, no debate. Gotcha. Well, so what were I'm curious. While we're on the subject of school, what were you like as a kid? Like 10-year-old Pete. What were you into? You were already rocking real estate, weren't you?
Mow lawns, shovel snow, and then I learned that I could organize people, and they could shovel the snow, and they could mow the lawns, and I could make sure it got done and get paid, and I couldn't get over that I could get paid for overseeing when I was 10.
At 10 years old, you had crews running already?
Well, it wasn't a crew. It was one or two people that I just say, yeah, they'll take care of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. There were any particular hobbies or favorite book or?
Well, I mean, I read lots of books. My favorite books were future history.
Future history. Mm-hmm. So what is that?
It's speculation on what's going to happen.
Okay, that's what I figured. But
one of my favorite ones is Robert Heinlein wrote a book called Fear No Evil, and he wrote it when the first heart transplant happened.
Really? Did that on a more personal? You didn't have a heart transplant, but
they said, where's that going to take us? Mm-hmm. Or he said that's where they're going to take us, and so he created a book about somebody who had a body transplant.
Wow. So how old were you when you read that book?
Teens.
Yeah. And what do you think now?
I love the book because what happened is it was a story of a guy who was one of the wealthiest people on earth, and he decided that if he couldn't take it with him, he wasn't going to die. But he was worried about the ethical question, saying, I want another body, and having someone kill someone to provide him with one. And so ultimately in the story, he was passing away and thinking maybe he'd had too many rules set up about getting a body. And when he woke up and was alive, his family said, no, you're not our uncle and father. You're the person whose body you're in. And so we inherit. And it's the argument about did the being survive or did the body survive? It was a very interesting book.
Interesting.
I like
that. I have to read it.
Then just to me, seeing that heart transplant and then carrying it out as you look to the future like that really fascinated me.
Nice. Yeah, I always get Heinlein and Asimov mixed up, but I know I've read a few of their books. Andy tried to get me or put me on to the Robots of Dawn, and did you read Asimov's books too? Or? Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I mean, not to dive into but there's, I don't remember what book it was that I read. But it was dealing with just the concept of more, immortality, and it's ultimately what the book was like. It was ultimately what protects us against evil and fascism and humanity being under the boot is that people die. Eventually the dictator is going to die, and it doesn't go on forever. It might go on for a long time, but that's cool. I haven't really dove into the future history type of stuff, but I think it's interesting. So awesome. Let's see here. I got some questions written down in general. Let's pivot to real estate real quick. I'm curious, there's always these rules, the 1% rule and other rules, and that people try and I don't know, make it easy to just do real estate, or do you believe in the one that type of stuff, or do you do deals by that? What is?
I might do a deal that fell into any rule or rule of thumb, or but if I did, it would be because I recognized it as an opportunity. Typically, when I hear people talking about 1% a month or 1.5% a month, I see deals that involve way too much participation, because that's not a return on investment. That's a return on bravery and martial arts. And I like really high quality houses that I've been able to buy and let somebody else pay for me. And that's really essentially what marks my target. Is I want to create a transaction where that part that I get is paid for by somebody else. Somebody else is going to do the work, going to take care of the house, going to enjoy the house, and I'm going to leave them alone. When I was in college and I was buying my first small multis, I was negotiating with people, not buildings, but I was indeed doing internal rates of return based on the capitalization rates and the promises I was giving. And so I'd buy an 8% cap rate. And as long as I could finance the property at 6%, I was happy to do that, because the wrap created by the 8% income net around 6% interest cost gave me a better yield. So I didn't buy cap rate, but I used the cap rate in order to structure the transaction, the promises I gave.
Gotcha. And to kind of, and it's funny, I wish that I last year when you came out, I was running around dealing with the Marriott and setting up sound equipment and all that, and I feel like I barely got to talk to you last year, and then this year, obviously we've been spending more time going around all the areas. So I wish some of the conversations we've been having, I wish I could have had the camera in the car, but so we might. So I do have, but one of the ones we were having was us, on these houses, and do you? Because I feel like a lot of people maybe. They're always chasing cash flow, and that's kind of like the, what's drilled into, you got to cash flow, you got to cash flow a lot to cover taxes and maintenance and all that. Do you think that's maybe focused on too much, or that, what would you tell people to just get into something, buy it, or do they have to cash flow? What's your?
It depends on what your position is in life. When I started, none of the houses cash flowed very much. They all covered because I just couldn't afford. I was barely scraping by to pay for me. I couldn't pay for somebody else's house. I was looking for people to buy houses for me. But I also was growing up doing this in the very late 60s and the early 70s. And the 70s was the time of inflation following the decoupling of the dollar from the gold standard. And so simply buying a break even where the financing was at fixed rates and everything except the financing was going up created a cash flow, as the lenders ended up, or the financiers ended up with fixed payments when everything else was going up. And ultimately, I had a cash flow 5 years later. Looking back, I see that when I was buying properties, they had to at least pay for themselves. And had I had a $500 a month minimum cash flow, then I would have bought less or negotiated better. I might have been a better negotiator. But when I look back, I say I should have been more aggressive. Had I taken on some negatives in pursuit of more and better properties, I and my family would be way ahead. But my goals were never to see if I could be the wealthiest person on earth or have the most houses. The majority of my friends today are retired with 5 to 15 houses and free to do whatever they want to do. We did the same. Essentially, we went up to 45, back to 30, back to 20, and down to 10.
Yeah, and I mean,
better quality all the time. less work. But first we had to grow the capital so we had enough wealth to provide cash flow that set me free. And that took me a decade to get to the point where I just made it. There was nothing extra, but it did give me enough income so I could survive.
So I mean, looking back, knowing what you know now, you would maybe not on every deal, but you would play the kind of the appreciation and inflation game of just getting into something.
Acquire
as long as it's not negative.
And I'm not looking at appreciation in terms of the property that I bought for $20,000 is now worth $750,000 because the $750,000 is not relevant to my life. I'm looking at the property that broke even that today provides me with $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
And it is building that cash flow that is inflation hedged that's the most important thing that I realized early on, straight out of Richest Man in Babylon. You want that income stream that's flowing by you all the time so you can scoop out what you need to survive.
That's a very good book, by the way. So for somebody that's, maybe let's do a couple scenarios here. So like somebody that's brand new, if they could just, maybe they don't even own a house yet. They're just, whether it's an investment or a primary, you would tell them to just like get what you can, and get it as sooner rather than later, rather than like saving up, because I
you definitely shouldn't save up. I mean, saving is just a silly way to do it.
I should have met you 7 years ago because it took me 3 years of doing real estate and saving up before I bought
I'm
something.
77, and if I saved up to buy a house, I'd almost be there now for my first house.
Yeah, and the economy and the whole financial system and everything like that, it really doesn't favor savers. Correct?
Well, certainly not when you got inflation as the way that the government pays for most things.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember read Ron Paul, I think it was one of his books a long time ago. And I should have listened harder, I guess, because I saved for a while, paid off debt, before I like jumped in and really went onto the rental game. I was already flipping and stuff, but that's a good point.
But when you talk about a starter, so you get starters that have really good careers that they're happy with, and they're making plenty of money, and they like what they do. So for those people, they have less urgency, I think. And if they can buy a good deal, get an option on something, just let some capital grow without interfering in their life, it's different than someone who is trapped in a job as a wage slave and who really is not happy with that. And those persons, they need to create the acquisition of capital and assets as a second job and get out and do it, or tighten up the purse strings so that while they're working, their spouse can be doing it. Yep. And I've known a lot of people who have been very successful in a job and had a spouse who has gone out and used the W-2 from the working spouse to develop a portfolio of houses that one day they could retire on. And people are so different. I run a lot of high-income people who really went in it after the tax shelter. I had a very good friend who was the son of an immigrant family, and he started to build houses up in New England. And he started rehabbing houses and then started to build. And the old established New England builders would always sell their houses first. And so Tom told me one day, some of my houses didn't sell before my construction loan was up. And he said, so I didn't want to risk my credit, so I rented those houses only because I couldn't sell them and compete with the more established builders. And he said, totally by accident, I found out, gee, I got this equity and I've got this cash flow, and I like having cash flow every month. And he ended up with a dozen or more nice houses, completely by accident because of what he was doing. But indeed, there are people with so many different current situations that they start for different reasons. But if people don't perceive that you have to get some capital assets to provide inflation hedged income, you're condemning yourself. Jack Miller used to say, avoid the certainty of poverty by investing. And he was dead on.
Nice. So what, like, I don't know what we call this, maybe a dreamer or starter. If there's someone out there that has, maybe they have a primary that they bought, years ago, and they got a lot of equity in it, and they're wanting to do something. Would you recommend that they, like, especially here in California, like, would you go down the borrow against that house, or would you lean towards more acquiring other houses without touching that equity? Like,
I would use that equity if I needed to, but I would not borrow it against it.
Okay.
I would use if I could borrow $100,000 against the house by going to some bank or pretender lender and give them $100, give them a note that I had to promise to pay $600 a month, and they gave me $100,000. Instead of doing that, if that's the number I could afford, I would go and make offers to buy houses using my house, my equity, as the security to make people feel comfortable in carrying the financing for me. But learning to get the people you're negotiating with to be involved in the solutions that you're creating for them or that you're creating together is the major role, because those people who you help are the ones who become your allies, who make the estate building ever easier.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because somebody, a newer member of the club was asking me the other day, and they have a fully paid off rental, and they have a primary with, quite a bit of equity, and I know that you make that sound so easy for somebody that's starting out trying to go negotiate that. It's always like the easiest thing for them to do is just to either get a HELOC or borrow against it as a second from a hard money lender or whatever like that. Is it necessarily bad to do that? Like, if that's all they know and that's what they're confident with,
it's lazy.
It's lazy.
It's lazy.
Mm-hmm. So you
see, because nobody wants that cash. Nobody's going to take the cash and just sit it on the table and look at it for the rest of their lives. The cash is simply a conduit, taking them from what they like less to what they like more. And your job is to help them find out what it is they need, like, more. To ask, why would you sell a nice house like this? Because people giving up a house, that's a big deal. You think of how much better off people are for having a house, whether it's one or two. That's a big step to let go of that asset.
Yeah. That's, especially for those of us that have been in it a while, at a certain point, some of it just becomes another house, but that's a very good point of remembering that, it's people that are in these situations. Sometimes it's really like all they have left, to solve their problems with. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we were talking about financing and stuff, we were talking about something the other day that, I was asking about a deal, and, you said something that I hadn't even really crossed my mind. I know you're probably going to talk about it a little bit this weekend, but, I was looking at a deal on that the people might carry on, and it was a flip that we were looking at it as a flip, and you had the idea that, well, why don't you just get the financing but secure it to something else, and then if you're going to sell the house anyways, why, without spoiling it, why is that a good idea, or what?
Well, you're somebody who wants to sell a house, and I don't want the house. That doesn't excuse me from helping them. And so how can I help them, and how can I benefit, or can I benefit? And if I can only help, I benefit because I make a friend, I make an ally, I help somebody, I feel good about myself. But I'm dealing with somebody right now who has 3 houses, and they're getting older, and his spouse said, "We're not going to have any more tenants, are we, honey?" And see, that meant no more houses. And so he came to me and asked me, and this is somebody I know, and asked me if I would buy his houses and give him installment sale paper to buy all those houses. He wanted to turn the houses into an income stream so his income didn't stop, but he didn't own the houses anymore. One of the houses is in Pinellas County. It's near me. It's in a neighborhood I really like. The other house is in another county across bridges for me. So I don't care for that. It's too far away. The other one is out of state that I absolutely don't want unless it was up in Massachusetts where my kids are, and my sisters and my brother are. And so in this case, he's got 3 houses. He wants me to buy them because I've done business with him. I've bought a dozen houses from him over the years. And he wants me to buy these 3 houses. I'm going to put the mortgages, which secure the notes, on houses in Pinellas County where I live. Oh, this is my plan right now. We haven't gone forward yet.
Yeah.
And I am going to keep the one that's in Pinellas. I'm going to sell the one that's over the bridge in Hillsborough. Just sell it, put it in MLS, sell it. So let's just say in a simple example that I give him a 6% 30-year note. And then I sell the house for the exact price that I bought it at. I get the cash, the $100,000 in this example. Take $100,000, and it's going to cost me 6%, which I'm paying to a real person. I can use that to pay off institutional debt, or I can use it to buy more property. But I can buy it where I want it, but still help him solve a problem. So buying property with paper has been a very good tool for me to use to raise money without dealing with the institutions which are so inflexible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you do that, I mean, I know on this one we were talking about, you were saying do it before you even, like move that note, walk that mortgage to a different property, and then, maybe go get short-term financing or something on the one I'm going to sell. If I didn't do it right then, or somebody didn't do it right then in that deal, could you just take the seller financing, put something in your note, put something in your agreement?
You don't need anything in the agreement.
To walk?
You don't need a thing in the agreement.
Really?
Yeah.
So it doesn't, because on my notes I usually put, I reserve the right to move this to someone else, similar
So now picture
asset.
you did that, and you want to take the house. You want to take the house I sold you, and you say to me, "I'm going to move the mortgage that I gave you off of your house." And I keep saying, "No, it's not your house. It's my house now. I bought it." and you're going to move it to a multifamily property in a terrible neighborhood. It doesn't matter what it says in that, the people are going to object. What I do is I tell everybody at the closing, when I'm negotiating, when I'm telling stories, I tell everybody about a deal I did where I moved a mortgage somewhere else. Then when the time comes when I've made payments to them, I've kept my promise, I've talked with them, I've helped them, I've become a friend.
Yeah.
I said, I got a chance to get a better house. Do you remember when we talked about moving the mortgage? I've done this now 50 years, and I've had one person refuse.
Wow. Okay. That makes you feel a little better. I put it, like I said, I put it in the notes, but I haven't actually done it yet.
Yeah.
If you have something, just a random question that I thought of, if like, let's say the note was in your LLC or something like that, and you wanted to move it to, your personal, something that was in your personal name, is there any hang up there, or is you just kind of renegotiating with the?
Oh no, because I'm never the mortgagor, but I'm always the debtor. Because I buy a house from you, and I give you a promise that I'm going to pay you $1,000 a month for the next 20 years. So I'm the debtor, but I put the mortgage on a property that belongs to my trustee. So I can't give you a mortgage.
Yeah.
The property owner is the only one who can lien the property. So you get a mortgage on the property from the trustee who owns the property to secure the note that's owed by Peter Fortunato to Rich.
Okay. Gotcha. Right on. Another one of the things we were talking about, which I wrote it down here, was doing like. I didn't write it down here. It was something that you and you and Lynn were talking about yesterday with the somebody got an offer on a house. And
Lynn got what he thought was a low price offer.
Yeah, low ball offer. And what was your counter to that?
You always accept the offer subject to them adding something that you like or them doing something that you like. And I suggested to Lynn that he accept the offer. And the difference between the offer and his price, he accept as an option to buy the house back. And that is a great counter.
So you take a haircut now, but it gives you.
Well, I don't take a haircut. I get full price.
Yeah.
But I get it in the form of an option, and in his case, cash. Cash would pay off debt or pay off partners or whatever you want to do with it. But the option controls that property in terms of its value. And I've had a number of times where people have come in with a low offer, and I always come back and say, I'll accept your $30,000 for the house and an option to buy the house back for $30,000. And you can have my house and enjoy it for a while, and I'll have your money and enjoy it for a while. And at the end of a period of time, I'll give you back your money, and you'll give me back my house. And it's fun to watch how they respond.
Yeah, when and then obviously from the investment side, it might be worth more in the future when you're able to buy it back.
Yeah.
And so I thought, and because a lot of us, especially, I know you never sell, but occasionally you do. But a lot of us that are maybe still acquiring our portfolios and still maybe flipping on the side to have some money. Well, maybe we have expensive toys. I don't know. We get those lowball offers and we're like, so offended by them. And it happens. It happens all the time. 15, 20,000 less on a $200,000 home. That's that's pretty low.
But the person that makes you an offer is never insulting you. He's saying, I love your house. This is all I can afford. So that's not an insult. Everybody that looks at your house and makes no offer, they're saying, for free, I don't want that barn. And that's an insult.
Yeah. Yeah. They always say, though, that's all we have. They got a little bit more. I got you. Right on. One of the things too, while we're on deals, we kind of talked about it the other day, but I asked some of the members, when we heard you were coming in, like if they could ask you a question, what would it be? Shammy
didn't just go up and talk to me.
What's that?
They didn't just come up and talk to me.
Well, it was specifically for this that we were gonna, we were in front of everybody, but we didn't get to them. So, like, what? Shammy wanted me to ask you. She's got and I think she did actually come up and talk to you, but just for the other people out there, she's got a deal in Alabama. It's seller financing. It's listed for $220.
Yep.
They got an offer accepted at $190K at 6% for an owner carry, but it needs $30,000 worth of work.
Yep.
And it doesn't sound like it would really it may be cash flow without repairs, and it sounds like it's going to maybe break even, but they're going to have $20,000, $30,000, maybe $40,000 into it between two partners. She's here. It's in Alabama. Would you still, like, from what we talked about earlier, she's just getting into this. So, like, is that would that be one of those things, like, just get into something, or
well, that's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. I'd buy the property with the owner financing, and what did you say? They wanted 200, and she thinks she can only sell it for 180.
They want it for 190. She thinks she could. I think it's worth 220, but it needs like 30 of work.
Okay, all right. So I would buy it. I would buy it for the 190
Mm-hmm.
and give a note at 4.5% for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
or at 5% for 45 years,
Mm-hmm.
or at a number that really made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would spend $30,000 if I had to borrow it and fix the house up. Or I would sell it as is, and I would take that cash
Yep.
and use that cash to either improve something I had that's local, that I can control. And I'll buy a property in Alabama to sell it to provide me with financing for a house in Pinellas. But I won't buy a house in Alabama to try to hold as a rental, because I don't know the neighborhood well enough, and I don't feel as that neighborhood's changing, as the school's getting better or worse,
Yep.
as some lunatic gets elected or appointed to a board and ruins the neighborhood. All that stuff, you need to be immersed in that, in the lifestyle of that town or that village, I think. And so I don't like to send my money away on its own, because it never comes back.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I invest in, or my rentals are all in one small town up here in California. You know, we get a lot of people. I think I asked you this last year, but it never gets old to say. You know, like, we have so many people, especially in California. You know, where it feels like the costs are always going up. It's hard to find anything that cash flows. It's like $500,000 here for a $500,000 is like a cheap house nowadays. But you know what I'm getting at. It's very expensive in California. People, especially investors, are always talking about like investing in Alabama or, Kansas or Iowa or whatever. And I know, we're not fans of it, but like, just tell me again. Like, I mean, like you just said it with the board and the education and stuff, but like, what is the better, like in the short like way to say that, like, what is the better idea for people that are thinking about going out of state, that live in California and are take their California money and go invest elsewhere in the country? What is the better plan for them?
Get a backbone and go make a good deal.
Get a backbone.
What you said is, you can't find something. And they just whine about not being able to find it. You don't find a good deal. You find an opportunity, somebody who's got some hardship, somebody who's got a vacant house, somebody that's got a house that they just had twins and they don't have room in it, somebody who's been told by the doctor that they can't handle the stairs anymore. And you go make a good deal. So if that means you say, I'll give you $100,000 now, and I'll give you the rest of your money when I sell it, not until, make that offer. But you should not say, I'm going to go to Kansas and speculate instead of staying in my neighborhood where I know what's going on. Your job is to build a future for yourself. And what you got in California is you got crazy people in politics, but we got crazy people in politics everywhere. And you got people who coerce, and there's just terrible people. You have to work around those people.
Just like stay with the devil,
Well, but you make a deal in a neighborhood that you know, and for me, that means I want to stay in a neighborhood where there's a community center, a really big church, a good private school. In my area, Bay Pines Veterans Hospital services the veterans who need medical care, and their families have moved in around that hospital to support the family. They brought people there, and that neighborhood is a good, tight neighborhood, and so I like to invest there because of the quality of people and the camaraderie that's built up in the area.
Yeah. No, and I 100% agree. And also what I maybe it's just another excuse, but obviously. And I know it's hard to get around. It's hard to get this to people because they don't, especially when they're getting into it, they don't necessarily believe you. But the more you do it, the more established you get, the more trust you build, and friends and allies and people around you that you build. It does feel like it gets easier to get deals.
Oh, absolutely.
But, you got all the gurus out there, and it feels like everybody's talking about real estate investing nowadays. there's a lot of competition. Do you feel?
But they're all talking about finding a good deal, and none of them are talking about your responsibility to actually work to help somebody out. Yep. And that's what it's about.
Yeah, because your life's your fault, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's you're right. You're right. And a lot of people, I tell people this too. Like they'll go look in Iowa. This is why I'm starting this Crestline Club, because they'll look at Iowa, they'll look at Kansas, but they won't drive to Victorville or Barstow or the desert or the mountains or whatever because it's too far.
But often they're the victim of somebody who's selling something.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah, and that's what they're getting sold the bill of goods, just like all the stuff that I get when I open my email and I get 700 killer offers.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Farrah wanted me to ask you, could you share an experience from a past deal that taught you a valuable lesson and significantly impacted how you could? So maybe like the one deal that, maybe like the light bulb. I mean, I'm sure you have a ton of these, but like is there one that stands out that was like, I thought this way, and then this happened, and it made me go a whole different path.
I don't think that. I think when I bought the triplex from John Pochask, and he was distressed that the tenant had left the place a mess that he fixed up. I made that deal. I was young. It was my fourth deal in my life. I made that deal with him, and I bought the property subject to a mortgage was owed to the local bank, and I gave him a note for his equity and bought it with no money down. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know him before then, but I got to know him very well. He became a wonderful friend and mentor. John introduced me to the local bank, introduced me to the banker. I negotiated with them to allow me to assume it, and he carried a mortgage. And then he referred a couple people to me as a real estate agent, and I earned commissions. And then he hired me to manage some of his properties. And then he bought some more properties through me and with me. And then we did deal after deal after deal. And when Gary Johnston asked me to talk about relationships and wealth building, and I look back, I found that I had done 71 transactions with 4 families. Wow. That speaks exactly to what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. But with John and I did 27 deals in 30 years. When he died in June of 2001. But his friendship and his support was just world-changing for me. That deal was just a gigantic deal. And if we threw away that triplex, it was still worth it because of all the good that came from it. I bought a house subject to a mortgage. Years later, we were really close friends and allies at that point. But the lady who I bought the house from, the lady who carried the mortgage that I bought the house, when I called her up to make sure I had the right address for making payments, she said, "I want you to pay me off." And I said, "Well, why? Why would you don't you want the cash flow?" And she said, "Well, no, I don't know you. I know Johnny Jones, who I carried the mortgage for when I sold it, and he's a very nice young man." And I said, "Well, I'm a nice young man." And she said, "I don't know you." And so I called John and said, "She doesn't want me to pay her 9% on like $38,000 back in the day." And John called her up and bought the mortgage. And so we bought it subject to. He bought the mortgage from her, and we paid John, somebody I knew. Those kind of relationships indeed make it easier and easier and easier.
You're right. And do you, I mean, a lot of us maybe are going like a million miles a minute. It's tough to stop and smell the roses every once in a while, as far as like maintaining those relationships and growing, and growing those relationships. Is it just natural for you? Is there, like Gary, what does he do? He sends his chocolates and his His
yeah, the fruit.
yeah, I forgot what it is.
Yeah, I don't do it. I call the people up and say, "Got anything I can help you with?"
Mm-hmm.
People call me up. I've borrowed from my tenants. That's one of the things that's just it's a riot that people cannot believe that a landlord could borrow from the tenants. And it's so funny that with all the things I've done, that just knocks people's socks off. They just don't know. They don't expect that. And I've done it a number of times.
And I think, you know, as somebody with tenants, you know, I try and, I personally, I try and I kind of keep like a separate like silo kind of thing of I like every one of my tenants, you know, I'm there for them if they really need me. A lot of them are, you know, probably not exactly my age, but maybe a little younger. A lot of them I'd probably be friends with, you know, as far as that we, you know, go hang out, you know, and do things. But I purposely like keep that separate because I just feel like I don't want to, you know, fall into that trap of, I won't like rent to friends or, you know, just, I want to keep that like separate so that I don't, you know, don't ruin the relationship.
Yeah.
Do you do the same thing?
No, the tenants are my most important catalyst. You know. The tenants are what makes it happen for me. Yeah. The tenants.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm friendly.
The tenants take care of my properties,
you know?
And pay me enough so that I can keep my promises and pay the people I promised. One of the things that was very interesting following all the COVID nonsense is I had people say to me, "Why are you so stressed with all of this?" Because the government has said you don't have to pay your mortgages. So you can just take a forbearance. And I'd say, no, I've got old people who depend on me for their retirement income, and I can't not pay them. And people just are shocked and puzzled they don't see the connections to people and how important your promises are.
But do you like go hang out with your tenants? Or?
No, but I talk to them because my tenants are the most important part of my deal. I make a deal. I buy a house. I promise to pay $1,000 a month. I don't have an extra $1,000 a month. It's up to the tenant. The tenant is my on-site manager and my source of income. Yeah,
but I mean, you also joke about, if they call you, for something, you tell them, well, if,
I tell them if they call, they're going to remind me that there's a problem. I have a lady who's in one of my houses, and she really, I essentially adopted her. She's now there, and she can't afford it. She's struggling to be there. She's paying me every month, and so she talked to me a couple months ago, and I said, I'm doing my best to keep your rents low. I appreciate the fact you've been. And she said, well, I'll go up. I can afford $50 more. And then she said, now, if I pay you the $50 more, what can you do for my house, improve the house? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you tell me what things you'd like done, and then I'll tell you what your rent will be. I haven't heard from her since.
Yeah. But okay. All right. So, I mean, like everyone's an ally, obviously, there's, and I think that's one of the hardest things to get across to people and trying to educate and teach other people how to do this is, it's not so natural for everybody, to want to interfere. Like, you talk about so much in people's lives, and, people kind of sit in the back of the restaurant like, don't talk to me, and it's tough. It's tough to teach that, sometimes. Yeah. But have you found anything that's like?
I watch it in the door knocking. Most of the people that I see teaching door knocking are talking about going door knocking to buy houses. And I have seen that work with enormous luck.
Of getting people out of their shell?
About when Jack Miller would knock on a door and say, your house looks like hell, I bet you need to sell it, don't you? I never found that to be a rapport building. I couldn't do that. And so I go out in a neighborhood, and I don't do that much anymore. I do it sometimes with friends, but I go out in a neighborhood looking for allies. And so I said, "Gee, I love this neighborhood. How long have you lived here?" And then when I'm done, I'll say, "Will you please call me, or have your neighbors call me when someone's got an excess house?" And lo and behold, weeks, months, years later, somebody calls me. And my job was to go out and recruit allies in that neighborhood, not to buy. If I bought a house, I'd surely buy it. But I've never knocked on doors and knocked on a door and bought the house.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of allies, like you have obviously been to, I mean, you speak all over the country. You go to a lot of RIAs, investor associations, clubs, whatever you want to call them. Why are those so, versus like somebody that maybe wants to get into this, if they're listening in, like versus going and paying somebody tens of thousands of dollars, like why are those type of groups so beneficial?
Because in the groups, you got people in all stages and with all kinds of backgrounds. And so you get to sit down together and say, I need some help with this, or what did you think of that? The sad thing I find is when you're sitting at a group, an opportunity comes up, and people sit there and take notes about, gee, Tom has a house that he'll carry the financing on. Gee, Susan has an option that's running out, and she doesn't have the money to close on it. Well, when you hear those things, those are opportunities. And you should write an offer right then and there and make that offer and see where it takes you, because the offer is the beginning of the discovery of how you can be beneficial to one another. And I think that's a big failing in a lot of the RIAs and the meetups. I was at a wealth builders meeting, and one of the hard money lenders got up at the meeting and said he had a house. So that's like warning. Lenders don't want houses. They're afraid of toilets. And so he got up with a house he did not want, and he said, "I'll sell this house for $10,000 down and $400 a month." And I'm watching people writing down on their scratch pads, "Tom's got a house." And I wrote
and they'll go run numbers on it later.
I wrote a team, and I said, "You got a deal, I'll buy it." I mean, obviously subject to inspection, and it was a terrific deal. And it was offered to everyone in the room, and they all sat there and made notes about what Tom had. I was at a class, and one of the people in the class said, "I've got an option, and I don't think I'm going to exercise it." So I walked over, invited her to lunch, and bought the option. And then went to the person who owned the property, just said, "I got the option, and what's next?" And we've made a deal, and again, friends, and we made friends, made allies.
Yeah, and I can totally picture you doing that, and other people not, because years ago when we were out Florida to see you and John and yours' class, Andy had been talking about exchangers and doing an exchange meeting out here, and that's one of the biggest things I remember was sitting on that in November of 2020. There was like 20 of us out on the patio it wasn't Denny's, but it was some other diner, and that was the biggest thing that I remember was you sitting there, just people were talking, and you were just just handing out offers, So yeah, absolutely. Pete, a lot of people definitely look up to you. A lot of people consider you, one of the best people, myself included, out in one of the best educators out there. I would say a lot of people consider you their hero. So who's your hero? Like who's your hero? Like what would you, like who do you look up to? Who inspired you?
Well,
mentor?
Both of my parents, because they started after the Second World War. They had an ice cream stand where they made the ice cream together in the kitchen. And the entrepreneurs are really heroes to me. I so admire entrepreneurs. everyone that I watched, everyone in my neighborhood growing up, they all were first or second generation immigrants to the United States, came because it was a land of opportunity, and they built something. And every one of them created someone for me to admire. The guys that I think I admire the most are the guys that are so ethical and so insistent upon doing things right and helping other people that it inspires me. And I feel as though a leader is not someone who coerces. The reason that capitalists must be the leaders is because they can educate and encourage and inspire. And I really believe that is the way of the world. And what gives me the hope is that people will exercise civil disobedience and just ignore those people who just coerce others.
And I think that's why people, honestly.
That was my business card way back when, years ago.
I like it. You mind if I read it?
Oh, of course I
Why wait for a transaction? Create a solution right now. Yep.
I'd try to write the offer on that card, get the entire thing in the card, and get it going. See where it goes from there.
On that note, what you're talking about, and I think that's what people are drawn to you so much too, is that you're very genuine, you're very real. You lead by example. I mean, even the stuff you talk about, people just see you doing it. And there's I know I asked you this the other night, but I'm going to ask you again. I spend a lot of time on probably more than I should on this website called Reddit. I've been on it for years, and it's a very, probably more of a, liberal, left-wing leaning website, but there's also, I think the internet kind of leans liberal in general, but, and not to get into politics here, one of the things I see repeated a lot and outside of like the real estate forums that are on it, and it's just a general, like, from young people too, and I'm sure it's not just Reddit. I mean, this is, real life, obviously, but a lot of just not believing that people can change their economic, outlook, and just a lot of despair, cynicism about the economy, about, previous generations had it so much easier, and there was so much more wealth to go around, and now it's been, an oligarchy, and all that stuff that we're having to deal with, and once in a lifetime changing COVID and climate change and blah 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 blah. Like the pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing that was like such a mantra for generations of Americans that just seems to be like a joke to a lot of people now. Like, how would you encourage them? Like, what would you say to that?
Well, as I see that, I remember being young and seeing Khrushchev say, when the Department of Education was put into the cabinet in the United States, that the Soviets, the communists, had won because the people who are educated in government schools are going to try to have everybody homogenized and have people be docile and raise their hands and do what they want. And they're then going to teach the next generation of teachers. So the teachers that came in, where in the 50s, they were guys who'd retired from a business, from a job, from the real world, and were now teaching. There were people who had family businesses and loved kids and wanted to teach. Now they're teachers who were in school and have no experience. The teachers are talking to teachers. Then they educated the people who are in the media, who now don't know the difference between reporting and editorializing. And so they're preaching from a standpoint that is all they see. It's not like a discussion or debate. It's simply been a mantra. And I'm seeing very, very little discussion. And I can't help myself. I am going to discuss and debate. And my beliefs are that the only thing that is prohibited in my world is coercion. And no person and no group should be able to coerce. And that leaders don't coerce. And in the United States now, people are used to being told what to do and accepting it. And people have chosen. I've got a T-shirt that says, "You be safe, I'll be free." And most Americans have chosen to be safe. You know, it used to be growing up in the families, the mother tried to keep the kids safe. The father tried to stress freedom. And now that's something that I just see as the way of the world. And people think that I'm a very strange or terrible person because I see that, and that's not the way they see it. And it's a shame.
Yeah, and you know, but like, is there you know, I struggled for many years and picked up habits that, you know, definitely didn't help. And, you know, I feel like, you know, real estate was a catalyst that changed my life, but it's, you know, that doesn't just mean, you know, it's like,
But you changed your life.
Yeah.
See, you saw the opportunity and you say, gee, that was interesting. You went and pursued it. And that's the great hope that I have, because I deal with people every day who started with little or nothing and have built enough wealth that they can have a happy life doing whatever it is they please. And some of them dance, and some of them like sports, and some of them travel, all kinds of different things. And I'm used to that. That's the people that I surround myself with. And I think that's important, that if people would surround themselves with people who aspire to something. And then they coach one another and they help one another. You know, one of the things that I'll be talking about when I'm talking about Your Life is Your Fault, I'm going to talk about you need to be inspired by your potential. And that means you got to see potential. You have to realize there are opportunities out there.
Yep. And do you like, I mean, it's, you know, I feel like some people that comes natural to, some people they got to hype themselves up. You know, did you ever have like times when you weren't so confident, and did you rah yourself up in the mirror, like, you know, scream into a pillow, like, you know, was there any, like, you know, like, what did you just self-motivated? Like
the confidence was much less important to me than the determination.
Yeah. So you just wanted it.
I was going to do this, and I'm going to keep trying. And sometimes I'm wrong. You know, I like to talk about that example of the option that I bought in 2005. And I looked so smart in 2006, and then in 2010 I looked like an idiot, and I lost all that money. Well, because sometimes you're wrong. I mean, I'd love to say I'm never wrong, just made good deal after good deal. That's not what happens. You make a choice to do something, and you follow that and see where it takes you, and you learn from that, whether it's good or bad. And making the choices, and you're the one who did it, means you can be proud or you can be ashamed, but it was your choice. You did it to yourself.
Yep. I guess the only mistake is just not continuing to try. You know,
have somebody else tell you what you're supposed to aspire to.
Yeah. Right on. Well, Caitlin wanted me to ask you too, what, as we kind of wrap up here, and this has been a tough one for us. It's a great question here. What was the deciding factor? When did you get to the point like where you decided on the house that you live in? And I don't know, maybe you guys moved recently, but when did you decide this is the house? Like, this is the forever house. This is the one we're going to raise the family in.
Never. You should talk to Gene about that.
There you go, honey.
I built the house that Gene and I were going to live in when our first baby was coming. And so I bought a fourplex, and we moved into one side. It was like a townhouse on one side and 3 apartments on the other. And we moved in there And Mary was born, and we brought her home to that house.
Mm-hmm.
And we still, 50 years later, we still laugh at. We came home, we walked to the front door, and Jean's mom and my godmother were in the living room. And they opened the door, took the baby away from Jean, and slammed the door, leaving us on the front porch. And so we went out to lunch. But I was building a house, and we moved into that house. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever had a house with a mortgage on it that I had to pay, because I had no tenant in there. And it was $432. And I'm thinking, where am I going to come up with $432 every month? And so we were in that house for a couple of years. And then we moved to another house. And then I traded for a lot and built a house, and we moved into that house. And then we went, and Jean's been very tolerant. We've moved a lot. But when it was an opportunity, make your dwelling a profitable dwelling, I feel as if when I go to a house, if I feel smart walking through the door, it might be home. If I don't feel smart, it's never going to be a home to me. And in 1996, I bought 4 properties from one guy who had a $3,500 a month negative cash flow. And I bought them for no money, just by taking the negative cash flow off his back. Mm-hmm. And one of them was the house on Bay Point where we live today. And I walked out to look at that house, walked out on that dock and looked around. And I didn't care if that house was a tent. I wanted to live there. I liked living there, looking at the water. And that's been our home. But as a home, I've traded it away, taken it back, traded it away. But I've lived there now since '96.
Oh, okay.
But in a heartbeat, I would trade that for 4 nice rental properties, waterfront, the whole thing, and add to our rental portfolio for my family. Except my wife loves it there. And we're at the point where we can afford to say, we're going to stay here.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. So, I've moved every 2 years now, for the last, I don't know, well, at least since the last 4 or 5 years since I started buying up rentals. And even before that, I'm used to moving, and she kind of wants to, whatever the next one is, this one we're converting some ADUs and going to make it cash flow pretty well. She's like, the next one I want to stay there for 5-6 years, and I'm like, I don't know. Not unless it's down on the beach and Newport or the something else. But so yeah, no, she'll like that one. Right on. That makes a lot of sense. All right, well we're gonna wrap up here. I got one more question. Obviously we've talked about kids and I'm going to be having one in 2 months. Yep. So and I just talked to I won't say his name because I don't know if it was all that public yet. So but talked to another friend last night in San Diego that's having one. So Pete, what's you have 4 kids?
4 kids.
4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl. And they're all, you told me they're all entrepreneurs. They're all, investors and what's maybe the top, what for a new dad or maybe just in general, give me some dad advice. What do you got for me?
Love the kids. From my kids, I discovered that it wasn't all my preaching. It was the fact that we would travel together, and the kids saw that I didn't have to come home because I had to go back to my job, go back to work. Mary said to me one day, Dad, my friends spend more time with their coworkers than they do with their family. And she was affected by that. I think that's real important. The other thing you're talking about with your baby coming, the most important thing in my life as a child growing up is my parents always listened. They always listened to me, and they usually, I'm not even going to say sometimes, they usually disagreed with me. And we'd argue, we'd discuss, but I never felt that my opinion wasn't important to them. And I think that that is a huge part of building a strong self-confidence and ego. I really look back and see the listening part as being important. I feel as though we did that with our kids. I really wanted my kids not to be afraid of the world. Yeah. And so whatever they wanted to try, even though I'd hold my breath and pray, I tried to encourage them to go try what they wanted to try.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And that, they basically, I mean, what you're saying earlier about leading, lead by example and being a leader, and you didn't even have to tell them. They just saw it. The proof was in the pudding, all around them. It sounds like so.
Oh, you try.
You
try.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. That's. I'll let you. We're probably over already. I don't even know. I didn't even look at the clock. But I think we're out of time here. So Pete, again, thank you for coming out here. I'm really excited for the class. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this weekend. This has been the Fire Chat podcast. You can check us out here at the Fire Center. You go to firecenterhq.com. By the time this goes up, Pete's class will probably be already over for the weekend, but he'll be hopefully coming out here next year. And if you want to check out me on Instagram, it's at FireRichRice. So I got a theme going there, or Fire Center HQ on pretty much all of our social media. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Again, Pete, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
and
you
you guys
Rich.
enjoy. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.